Well, as we mentioned, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese's had a late afternoon media conference in Canberra. It seemed to me that he made an announcement about the visit by the Chinese Premier and then launched into an attack on Peter Dutton around climate policy, which I think was probably the reason why he wanted to have this media conference. Sky News' political editor, Andrew Clennell, joins Peter at this time each week and joins us now. It seemed like the Chinese announcement was just sort of, a byproduct, and then he used the rest of that media conference to whack Peter Dutton over this 2030 policy. Andrew, how are you?
I'm well, Steve. Well, yes. I mean, he wouldn't confirm yesterday the visit, which we've been reporting for days, not weeks, until the Chinese were putting out a joint statement. So I guess he was pushing that formality out there. But there's no doubt Peter Dutton has given a press conference today where TV grabs were going to be used in terms of his stance on a 2030 target, climate change target. So I guess the Prime Minister was keen to get a run as well, Steve. That's the way these things work. And he thinks that there's fertile ground to attack Peter Dutton over not being consistent on a climate change target. He thinks that it'd be very difficult for Peter Dutton in so-called teal seats as a result of that. Peter Dutton, on the other hand, he knows that this cycle in Australian politics often goes from concern about climate change after fires and floods to concern about power bills in a cost of living crunch. So I think Dutton thinks it's the right time to tack in the other direction on climate change, and that's exactly what he's doing.
I'll dig into the detail of Dutton with you in a sec. You know I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I never have been, and neither are you. It just stuck out to me in this announcement about Premier Lee's visit. Now, if you're coming to Australia and you're a senior Chinese leader and no one's been here since 2017, would you really choose Adelaide, Canberra and Perth as your destinations, ignoring Sydney and Melbourne? And is it a coincidence that Perth and Adelaide are where the AUKUS submarine program is going to be based?
Oh, I don't think it'd be to do with AUKUS. I mean, he wouldn't like to talk about AUKUS, the Premier, but it may well have been coordinated so there are announcements, whether that be about the lifting of the lobster fisher ban or about pandas in Adelaide or whatever it is, Steve. It may well be that it's been aligned to those sorts of things. So obviously the two governments through officials would have worked that out. But from the federal government's point of view too, I mean, they would see in Perth him getting a better audience in terms of the mining industry. So I suspect that played into events. But yes, I'm sure the Premier would prefer to have at least a visit to Sydney. Such a beautiful place, but he doesn't get that opportunity, does he? It was very deliberately held in a non-sitting week, so there was no discomfort. This is what I understand, Steve. So there was no discomfort over no address to Parliament, as President Xi had the pleasure of doing when Tony Abbott was Prime Minister in 2014, and that would have been very difficult indeed had he, come during a parliamentary week or expected some sort of address to Parliament. I guess he's the second in charge as well, but they're not even a democracy, so you wouldn't have them address Parliament.
The Peter Dutton performance today and the gamble that the coalition now appears to be taking with this walking away from any targets for 2030, the Prime Minister couldn't resist coming out today and responding to that. How much of a carrot is being dangled in front of the PM by Peter Dutton to bring on an election over climate and do it quickly?
Well, he'll take any excuse to go at the end of the year, I would have thought. So if this is an excuse, then he'll take advantage of it. Maybe it's the opportunity he's been wanting. I mean, I saw the newspaper journalists speculate on that today. I don't think Albanese can go in September before Queensland. I think that would just look too early. But he knows in 3 weeks the tax cuts are coming and the energy bill relief are coming. So I guess there is an opportunity there. I would have thought more November, December. I think they're on that track anyway because the way the economy's going, they're not expecting a rate cut until at least next year, and maybe after an election's due next year. So wouldn't you rather take the gamble early? But he probably hasn't made up his mind. Peter Dutton's position's interesting on this one, Steve. I mean, I saw a reporter on the weekend that he opposed the government's 2030 target. If you can get your head around this, I think the more accurate description of this is Peter Dutton doesn't support that target. So he's not opposed to it per se. He's just saying, well, you're not going to meet it, so there's no point even discussing it other than the fact that you're not going to meet it. The big test will be, and it's due in February next year, the 2035 target, and that, I dare say, the coalition's would be lower than Labor's. But of course, this is kind of internationally enshrined with the UN, the 2031. So that's why he's careful not to say we're changing that, because then you'd have to pull out of it altogether, the international agreement.
Is the coalition at one on this, Andrew? I mean, you've got Matt Canavan and Barnaby Joyce calling for the whole Paris Agreement to be scrapped, to walk away from that. How's this going down in the joint party room, do you believe?
Well, they've never been at one on it. And Albanese knows that too, that he can split them over it. So, but the moderates, you know, they haven't got a lot of members left in there, so there's not a lot of muscling up on that side. And the Nationals had already made clear, I think David Littleproud had said in about April that he didn't support the 2030 target. So a concern for the Liberals is always getting the Nationals on board. Now, to get the net zero target by 2050, Scott Morrison had to work very hard on the Nationals, and he was pretty lucky to get that over the line. So I'm sure Peter Dutton is cognizant of all those difficulties as well.
I see Peter Dutton, he gave the Teal member for Mackellar a whack, and you've got all of these other seats where the Teals obviously took off the coalition last time. We talked about places like Higgins, Kooyong, with Higgins about to be scrapped. A lot of people saying, oh, well, that's a dangerous thing for Peter Dutton to do. But certainly in the inner eastern Teal seats in Melbourne, I think there's quite likely to be a backlash against those Teal members. And this climate policy that Peter Dutton's now prosecuting is going to probably play into the hands of voters in those seats. What do you make of this, the Teal situation going toward an election coming up?
Well, I think it is a gamble. I think it's certainly a gamble, because to actually hit office, you'd want to pick up a couple of Teal seats as well as your majority of wins being Labor seats. It's a numbers game. He's got 55 seats. I mean, you know, he'll get 56. He'll get Monash back, Russell Broadbent. The coalition might not get Calare back with Andrew Gee as an independent. Labor's got 78 seats. So, you know, there's every possibility with the news poll the way it was, Steve, we'll end up with a parliament with 70 to Labor and 66 to the coalition. But if you actually want to win office and get in a position where you have 72, 74 seats, you need to win a couple of those back from independents. So there's a degree of gamble about it. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think Peter Dutton thinks the retail argument wins over with power prices, etc. The other danger is in this, that he's seen by some as taking Australia backwards, as taking Australia back 10 years. And you heard the Prime Minister make the argument in the press conference, and it has some validity, I think, that if you bag renewables, and Peter Dutton actually said he supports renewables today, just not the target, but if you bag them and you look like you're coming into office, people will stop investing, and that will actually have the perverse outcome of making the energy situation even worse. So that will be Albanese's argument. Peter Dutton's argument will be on the side of Australians and the cost of living, and in terms of what power bills are. And that's my main priority, and that's a pretty compelling argument for a lot of Australia as well.
Yeah, you have to say Peter Dutton's not going to die wondering. Andrew Clinella, it was great to catch up. Thanks for your time, mate.
Thanks, Steve.